My name is Nicole Hudson, and I used to be a 45-year-old nurse, living an ordinary life as a registered citizen in Sacramento, California. Today, however, I am a minister, dedicating my life to revealing the profound truths that God has shown me. What I am about to share with you is not just a story, but a real and transformative testimony that involves a near-death experience. In this supernatural journey, something extraordinary happened. Jesus showed me a surprising and even shocking truth about the power of fasting. It was not merely a religious practice, but a powerful spiritual weapon that I had never fully understood until I experienced what I am about to reveal. This experience completely changed the way I view prayer, fasting, and the spiritual kingdom. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to hear may transform your life as well. Before we dive into this account that transformed my life, I want to ask something special of you. Please share in the comments where you are watching us from. Although we are physically separated, this interaction brings us closer and strengthens our connection. And please don't forget to like this video and leave your comment about the testimony I am about to share. Let's create a space where we can discuss these spiritual truths openly and respectfully. This channel is a place for mutual learning and spiritual growth. So sit back and enjoy this experience as I narrate something that can change your perspective on life, death, and the power of fasting. It all began on September 12, 2023, a date that will be etched in my memory forever. I was on the 7th day of a water-only fast, something I felt was a direct calling from the Holy Spirit. I had always believed in the power of fasting and practiced it as part of my spiritual walk, but this particular fast carried a different weight, almost indescribable. It felt like I was being led to a much greater purpose, although at the time I couldn't fully understand what was to come. That morning, at 5:30 a.m., while driving to the church prayer meeting, the streets were calm, enveloped by a light rain, a rare phenomenon for Sacramento at that time of year. I was listening to worship music, allowing the lyrics and melodies to connect me even more with the presence of God. Each breath seemed imbued with a spiritual closeness I had never felt with such intensity. Everything seemed harmonious, but this moment of peace would be abruptly interrupted. As I turned onto Madison Avenue, I was struck by something devastating. A drunk driver, speeding in a pickup truck, ran the red light and collided directly with the driver's side of my car. The impact was so forceful that it crushed my vehicle, throwing me into a critical state. I later learned, through medical reports, that the accident resulted in severe internal bleeding, multiple organ failure, and, most impressively, my heart stopped beating for exactly 17 minutes and 23 seconds. However, during those minutes when my earthly life seemed to have come to an end, I experienced something I will never forget. A more real and tangible experience than any I have ever had. The transition between life and death was almost instantaneous. In one moment, I was trapped among the car wreckage, and in the next, I found myself floating above the accident scene. Everything was incredibly vivid. I could see paramedics tirelessly working to revive me, police officers redirecting traffic, and even the driver who hit me, sitting on the curb with his head buried in his hands, overcome by despair. But as I watched the scene, something even more extraordinary began to happen. The world around me started to gradually disappear, and an invisible force began to pull me upward, as if I were being sucked through a tunnel made of pulsating light. What I felt as I passed through this tunnel is impossible to fully describe in words. There was no fear, pain, or confusion, only an overwhelming peace that flooded every part of my being. It was as if I were being enveloped by a love so pure that it transcended anything I had ever experienced. Although I was no longer in my physical body, my perception and consciousness were amplified in ways I could never have imagined. Every sound, every spiritual sensation was immeasurably more real than anything I had ever lived through before. Suddenly, the tunnel ended, and I emerged in a place I can only describe as the outer courts of heaven. The beauty of what I saw was indescribable. Colors I had never seen on Earth, celestial music that seemed to envelop everything around me, and a light so bright that, paradoxically, it did not hurt my eyes. Everything was perfect, but what truly caught my attention was something that seemed to transcend even this incomparable beauty. Looking down, I could see Earth, but in a completely different way. Between heaven and earth, there were golden threads, shining like the sun, connecting both realms. These threads were not there by chance. They were created by people who were fasting and praying, serving as channels of light that united the physical with the spiritual. It was at that moment that I heard the voice. There was no doubt in my mind. It was the voice of Jesus. He had not yet revealed himself visually, but his presence was so palpable that it seemed to fill every fiber of my being. He said, "Nicole, I have brought you here to reveal what your eyes have never seen and what your ears have never heard." His voice carried an indescribable authority and at the same time a gentleness that conveyed pure love. Then, Jesus appeared before me. The vision of Jesus was something I will never forget. He was glorious, with a familiar appearance, yet infinitely more grand than any artistic representation. His presence emanated a perfect blend of power and love, radiating a light that seemed to heal and renew everything around him. His eyes enveloped me in such deep love that in that instant, I felt completely known, as if every part of my being was open to him. "Observe," he said, and thus began the sequence of visions that would forever change my understanding of the power of fasting. "Many of my children," Jesus explained, "believe that fasting is a way to convince me to act, as if it were a spiritual currency. But fasting is not about persuading or bargaining with me. It is, in fact, an act of positioning. When you fast, you align your spiritual frequency with the frequency of heaven, allowing my will to flow through you with clarity and power." His words carried a depth that echoed in my spirit, completely transforming my understanding of fasting. Then he showed me something extraordinary: the impact of fasting in the spiritual warfare. I saw believers who were fasting, and they did not appear to be ordinary people. They were clad in bright spiritual armor, like warriors prepared for celestial battles. Their prayers during the fast were like arrows of light, swift and precise, hitting specific targets with impressive force. These prayers, fueled by the spiritual strength of fasting, had an impact that seemed to disintegrate walls of darkness and break chains of oppression. However, I also saw a clear warning. The enemy does not remain inert in the face of the power of fasting. He knows its impact and attacks those who fast, trying to weaken them physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Protection is crucial during fasting, Jesus emphasized, his voice laden with seriousness. "Cover yourself with my blood and my word. Never fast based solely on your strength or human understanding. Fasting needs to be led by the Spirit and rooted in me." He then revealed something even deeper: the relationship between fasting and spiritual authority. Each day of fasting, he said, functioned as a spiritual promotion in the army of heaven. It was like watching a soldier receive higher and higher ranks of insignia. The spiritual authority of a fasting believer was amplified, and their words and prayers carried much greater weight in the spiritual realm. However, Jesus made it clear that this authority was not something earned or deserved. Authority, he said, is a gift. It is granted by me, and fasting positions you to use it effectively. I was then led to see something that left me in awe. Jesus showed me how fasting creates spiritual deposits, like invisible reservoirs in the heavenly realm. I saw believers who, through regular fasting, were accumulating spiritual provisions that would be used in times of great need. These reservoirs not only strengthened them during times of trial, but also blessed others around them. It was a powerful reminder of how every sacrifice in fasting had eternal implications. The next glimpse he shared was one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed. During fasting, the worship of believers seemed to gain a special fragrance in heaven. It was as if the sacrifice of fasting was a precious ingredient that made worship even more pleasing to God. "When my children worship while fasting," Jesus explained, "this worship uniquely harmonizes with the eternal praise in heaven. The sacrifice of praise combined with the sacrifice of fasting creates something powerful." As I absorbed everything that was being revealed, Jesus showed me a more serious and urgent vision. He said that we are entering times when fasting will be more important than ever. I saw spiritual challenges and trials approaching, requiring levels of spiritual authority that can only be accessed through the combination of prayer and fasting. "The days to come," he said, "cannot be faced with superficial spiritual practices. My people will need to be spiritually strengthened. Fasting will not be an option, but a necessity." It was at this moment that Jesus revealed what fasting does in the spiritual realm. He showed me dark chains that were imprisoning people and entire regions. These chains represented addictions, generational curses, and forms of spiritual oppression. When someone fasted with faith and a pure heart, these chains began to unravel, weakening until they were completely broken. I saw people being freed, families being restored, and spiritual territories being transformed through the power of fasting. One of the most exciting revelations came when Jesus showed me how fasting unites our spiritual effort with his ongoing ministry of intercession. When we fast, it is as if we are joining him in a special way. I could see the genuine joy in Jesus' heart when his children chose to deny themselves to be part of his purposes. "Nicole," he said, "when my children fast with sincere hearts, it not only moves the spiritual realm, it moves my heart." He then revealed something that brought tears of emotion to my eyes. Fasting has the power to restore our spiritual heritage. I saw how the fasts of some people were unlocking blessings and promises that had been buried for generations. It was as if their fasts were clearing the debris from old spiritual wells, allowing the springs of living water to flow again. Jesus also showed me the impact of fasting in creating spiritual bridges. These bridges connected different purposes and works of God, creating pathways for his power to flow in specific situations. I saw how today's fasts can create connections that God will use in future times, impacting generations. Finally, he revealed how fasting can multiply the spiritual impact beyond what we can comprehend. I saw how the faithful fast of a single person could influence entire communities, triggering cascading spiritual effects that resonate over time. The impact of fasting, Jesus explained, often exceeds what you see in the physical world. Its fruits can be harvested in eternity. As the time of revelation came to an end, Jesus gave me a final message that echoes in my heart to this day. "Tell my people what you saw. Teach them that fasting is not about human power, but about partnering with me." It is time for my church to rediscover fasting as a spiritual weapon and as a form of preparation for what is to come. When I thought that God had already revealed enough through my first near-death experience, he had something even deeper reserved for me. 3 months later, during a period of prolonged fasting and prayer, something extraordinary happened again. This time there was no accident. Instead, I experienced what doctors would later describe as an inexplicable cardiac event while praying alone in my room. That afternoon, my heart stopped for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. During those precious moments, I was transported once again to that familiar realm of living light. As soon as I entered that space, I immediately understood why God had brought me back. There was more he wanted to show me about fasting. Jesus was there, his presence as majestic and overwhelming as before. But this time, there was something different. He seemed even closer, like a friend eager to share a precious secret. His gaze held a mix of urgency and tenderness that made me feel completely enveloped by his love. "Nicole," he said, "I have brought you back so that you can see the fruit of what you have learned." Suddenly, I was enveloped by a panoramic vision of the spiritual impact that has been happening since I began sharing my testimony about fasting. I saw flows of light, those very spiritual channels I witnessed in my first experience, multiplying across Earth. Each thread of light represented someone who began to understand and practice biblical fasting after hearing the truths Jesus revealed to me. "Observe," he said, and I was transported into the lives of these people. I could see transformation happening before my eyes. Addictions were being broken, illnesses were being healed, relationships that were once destroyed were being restored, all as a result of the combination of biblical fasting and prayer. But what moved me most was witnessing the intimate moments these people had with Jesus during their fasts. Every sacrifice, every meal foregone, had created space for a deeper communion with him. "Do you understand now?" Jesus asked, looking me in the eyes. "What I revealed to you was not just for you. It was for my church, my beloved bride. Every truth you shared planted seeds that are now bearing fruit." Then he showed me something that made me cry. I could see how each time someone applied these truths in their lives, it created a cascading effect in the spiritual realm. Not only were their lives impacted, but so were future generations. The spiritual waves created by fasting and prayer were forming something greater, a movement of spiritual revival, preparing the way for what is to come. The days that are coming, Jesus said, will require my people to walk in levels of spiritual authority they have never experienced before. What I revealed about fasting is not optional. It is essential preparation for the challenges that will come. As he spoke, he revealed a new spiritual dynamic being created in his church. As more believers embraced biblical fasting, their collective spiritual authority grew, pushing back the darkness in unprecedented ways. I saw darkness being driven back in families, communities, and even entire nations. Tell them once more, Jesus commanded. But now, speak with the authority of someone who has seen the fruits. Tell my people that I am calling my church back to biblical fasting, not as a mere religious practice, but as essential preparation for the greatest outpouring of my Spirit you have ever witnessed. He then showed how each person who embraced these truths became a beacon of spiritual light. Their lives shone with divine intensity, repelling darkness and influencing everything around them. But Jesus once again emphasized, the power was not in the act of fasting itself, but in his faithfulness to honor the humble sacrifice of his children. Remember, he said as my time there was coming to an end, I showed you these things not so that you would just understand, but so that you would help my people understand. The time is shorter than they realize, and my church must be prepared. Just before everything began to disappear, Jesus spoke one last time. Tell them that I am not calling them to fast to earn my love. They already have it completely. I am calling them to fast because I want to entrust them with my power. Darkness is increasing, but through fasting and prayer, my light in them will shine even brighter. When I returned to my body in the hospital, I knew with absolute certainty why God had allowed me to see these things. Everything Jesus had revealed about fasting was not only confirmed in the scriptures, but was also being proven in the lives of those who applied these truths. This second experience left me with an even deeper conviction. Jesus is calling his church to rediscover the power of biblical fasting. Jesus' call is not to manipulate God or gain his favor, but to position ourselves and partner with heaven in these critical times. The real question is not whether Jesus is calling for fasting. It is evident. The true question is, how will we respond? Will we heed his call and prepare ourselves spiritually, or will we allow fear and apathy to prevent us from living this truth? If you are hearing this now, it is not by chance. Jesus is extending this invitation to you. He is calling you to a deeper understanding of fasting, not as an obligation, but as an opportunity for transformation and partnership with heaven. Do not let anything stop you from entering into this truth. The spiritual kingdom is more real and impactful than anything we can see with our physical eyes. Through biblical fasting, we can open pathways to heaven that will impact not only our lives, but also future generations. The time is now. Jesus is calling, and he expects his church to respond.